everyone. I'm Donna Bush with your CIGTV News Update. Thanks for joining us. This week will be another busy one for government officials as they host this year's Pre-JMC meeting and hold the first trade summit here in Grand Cayman. Chief Officer for the new Ministry of International Trade, Investment, Aviation and Maritime Affairs, Mr. Eric Bush, explains.
On Wednesday, the Premier is hosting this year's pre-Joint Ministerial Council meeting for UCOTA members. That brings together all of the leaders from the British Overseas Territories to talk about issues relating to the Overseas Territories and the UK, talking about Brexit, talking about political initiatives that the UK government are contemplating outside of Brexit and how that affects the overseas territories. And this year we've injected the main topic of trade and economies, because the overseas territories, whilst very diverse, are very similar in size. Very diverse in relation to the geography. You know, you have some in the South Pacific, some in Europe with Gibraltar, some off Argentina and the Falklands, and of course you have a core in the Caribbean. So it brings together all of the political leaders to talk about the issues relating to everybody, and if there is a cluster of overseas territories like the Caribbean that has a specific issue just relating, let's say, to hurricane preparedness and preparation, etc., then we can take that off as a group to talk with the UK government about if it's necessary.
And you can watch the entire interview with Mr. Bush on CIGTV and our YouTube channel starting tonight. Well, Director of the Cayman Islands Customs and Border Control, Mr. Charles Clifford, witnessed the signing of the newly established treaty to form the Caribbean Customs Organization. The signing ceremony took place on May 22nd during the 41st Annual Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council Conference that was held in Havana, Cuba. In attendance were various regional and international government officials and United Kingdom ambassador to Cuba, who signed the treaty on behalf of Bermuda and all Caribbean overseas territories, with the exception of the British Virgin Islands. This treaty will now provide the legal framework and will formalize and enhance the contents of the existing MOU, first signed back in 1989, and which now has 36 signatories. The Memorandum of Understanding allowed for the exchange of information and mutual cooperation for the prevention and repression of custom offenses within the Caribbean region. Meantime, the Department of DVDL points out that visitors to the Cayman Islands are not required to pay for a visitor permit in order to drive, provided their domestic license is valid and belongs to a convention country. Now, the Department of Vehicle and Driver's Licensing would like to clarify that visitors to the Cayman Islands are, of course, no longer required to pay CI $16 for a permit in order to drive legally on the roads. It has come to the attention of the DVDL that some insurance companies suggest the visitors must obtain a visitor permit before they're legally covered by insurance. According to law, persons from countries stated under the Geneva Convention are allowed to drive in other listed countries on a current valid foreign driver's license of the same vehicle group. That is, a visitor to the Cayman Islands can drive on their foreign license without purchasing a separate permit, as long as their license is valid and they're qualified to drive the same vehicle type at their home. Now, visitors who do not have a domestic license from a convention country or an international driver's permit must pass a written and road test before they're allowed to drive in the islands. The DVDL is, of course, thanking the vehicle rental agencies as well as insurance industry for their service over the years. Well, if you missed today's news update, you can go to the Cayman Islands government Facebook page as well as the CIG Television YouTube channel. I'm Donna Bush, as always, thanking you for joining us, wishing you a wonderful and, of course, a very safe night, and inviting you back here again tomorrow. Until then, bye-bye for now. Did you know that planning permission is required for a shed? Did you know you should check with the department as a planning and permit application may be required? Did you know planning permission is required to clear land by mechanical means? You should check with the department as a planning and permit application may be required.
Boating, fishing, and water sports in the Cayman Islands are great, but keep a cool head. Here are 7 tips for fun and safe sea outings. Number 1. Use a checklist to plan your outing. Check the weather forecast, make a float plan, and share it with someone who is remaining on land, stating where you're going, with whom, and when you're expected to return. Visit your nearest marine supply store to get your safety gear. This includes signaling mirrors, whistles, and a flare kit. It's also very important to have onboard flotation devices and life vests for each person. There are different types of vests. Some are for water sport activities such as snorkeling, and others are for going on offshore boating or on fishing trips. Number 2. These items can be lifesavers in case of an accident or bad weather. Number 3. Use a motor kill switch, especially if you're boating alone. In case of a leak or breakdown, always stay with the boat until help arrives. If you capsize, an emergency beacon or locator device can send a distress signal to inform the authorities of your location. Larger flares will indicate distress to a boat, airplane, or search and rescue officials. Number 4. In addition to sunscreen, food, and beverages, it would be smart to have a cell phone. Make sure your marine radio works. Cayman boaters use Channel 16 to communicate. Number 5. Also, don't forget your anchor and sufficient rope. Number 6. Boat operators should be familiar with the local waters and reefs, as well as the capabilities and functions of the vessels they are using. Always obey the rules of the sea and the marine environment, and have courtesy for others. Number 7. Alcohol and salt water do not mix, especially if you're the captain. Some useful contact numbers are 911. The RCIPS Marine Base is 649-7710, and the Port Authority is 949-2055. Smooth sailing, all!
Did you know that planning permission is required for an addition, alteration, or any material change to your house? The 10% rule no longer exists. Did you know you should check with the department as a planning and permit application may be required?
The Esterly-Tibbetts Highway 3-lane roundabout is ready for drivers. It's time to make sure you know how to use it. First, know which exit you need to take. Pay attention to lane arrows and signs. Make sure you use your signal to change lanes or exit the roundabout. To turn left, you always approach in the left-hand lane and indicate left. To drive straight ahead, you need to be looking out for signs and road markings indicating which lane to use. Get in one of the lanes marked with a straight-through arrow. If turning right, you must use the right-hand lane and indicate accordingly. To use the roundabout safely, remember these 3 tips. Know your exit, pick your lane,